What's going on, y'all? We are back. This is ultimately going to be lesson number 2 in this free course that I'm creating. And these podcasts are really the way that I kind of set this up into this system that I'm building. These podcasts are really just my way of talking out things. So basically, last week we did lesson 1. Now this week we're going to do lesson 2. And really, last week was all about, because again, I've tried to sit down to like write out week by week, lesson by lesson of exactly what these things are going to be. But every time I sit down to try to do that, it's just that I feel like I'm really trying to force something to come together. And I find that there's much more flow when I just kind of allow myself to be with it. And really when I'm teaching, because me just sitting on my nice cute red rocking chair. Well, it's not a rocking chair, but my thinking chair over here, and just thinking about shit is cool. And that's where I get a lot of deep work done that way. But when it really comes to putting these things out there, it's like for me, it helps for me to teach. And so that's what these podcasts are, is like I'm teaching, and by teaching, I'm also learning, because like you'll kind of, if you understand that principle, that there's always a complementary opposite, because there can't be an experience without the illusion of imbalance, and therefore there's always a balance in some way. And so basically, in order for there to be learning, there must be teaching. One cannot exist without the other, just like day cannot exist without night, light can't exist without dark, hot can't exist without cold. We don't have a reference point for something unless we know its complementary opposite. And it's complementary because one exists with the other. One cannot exist with the other. So when I'm thinking about things to teach, it helps when I actually teach them, because then I'm learning as I'm teaching, and that's how it works. And I forget what I think it was a book by Mike Michalowicz. He told a story of he was walking with somebody, and they were like in a school or something. They were passing classrooms, and the guy that he was with, Mike, he was pointing out every time they would pass a classroom, he was pointing out and saying, "Oh, that's the best student." And like every classroom he would point at, like, that's the best student. And then after a while, Mike was like, what do you mean? How do you know that's the best student? Is it because they're sitting in the front of the class? Is it because they're taking the most notes? Like, how do you know what the best student is? And then he said, the guy that he was talking to was like, it's easy. The best student is the teacher. Because in order to really understand something, like, you can't teach something unless you really understand it. But also, in order to really understand something, it helps to teach it. That's why, as an athlete, when you turn around and start coaching, it actually helps you be a better athlete. And that's why the way that I've been kind of developing Optimal Evolution is this structure, is this kind of system to take somebody from, firstly learning how to help themselves and learning how to coach themselves, but then ultimately then coming full circle to be able to start helping other people help themselves. Because there comes a point where, you read, and many different people have talked about this concept, and it's in my experience, it's very true. You read so many books, you take so many courses, you've got so many certifications, like you learn so much. And there comes the point, like, you really can't learn anymore unless you teach what you learn. Because until you teach, it's just a bunch of theory. When you actually start putting these things out there, and part of the teaching too is teaching yourself. So it's like, it's one thing to get a bunch of information and like read a book, but then you have to, if you don't apply anything, again, it's just ideas. And so in order to take ideas into something that is more tangible, and to really, what becomes wisdom is to have an experience. And this is kind of beyond the point, but again, we're just talking this shit out here. That's kind of the thing with AI, is like, and I haven't like heavily researched AI, but just understanding from a concept, it's like AI is the equivalent of, you've read every single book, like you've been able to consume every single piece of information that has ever existed, that anybody's ever put out. And so it's like that really smart kid in the class that just knows everything. But having the information isn't equivalent with using that information. And that's why, with the AI technology, it's why, at least from my perspective, it can't really replace the human element, because as humans, we can have experiences. We can take information and not just regurgitate it, but we can take information and we can embody it through our thoughts, through our actions, through the way that we react to different situations and people and circumstances in our lives. And that gives us an experience, which an experience, again, it takes this something that's intellectual, something that is just an idea, and it becomes a knowing now. Just like when you know that you love somebody, that's not something that you can, write it down on a piece of paper or try to explain it in this like mathematical, scientific way. It's a knowing, or like a mother, giving birth. Like that's not something that is, you're reading about it and you got to go to school for 10 years before you know how to give birth to a child. It's just like, it's something that happens, and it's something that is just built into our DNA. Essentially, it is a knowing. And so, there's many examples like that, even from, how does your heart beat? How do you digest food? How do you grow new cells? It's like, these aren't things that we are doing. It's just a knowing. It's like, it's an innate intelligence that is connected to the infinite intelligence that allows for this whole experience to be possible. But that was a rant, and I think there were some helpful things in there. But what I'm also trying to do is, because it's very easy for me to kind of get off into my own wonderland of all of these different things and go down a lot of rabbit holes. And I think this stuff is very valuable. And I do, again, I don't really give a fuck. Like, I just throw it out there and see, because again, when I talk this shit out, it actually helps me to kind of hear back. That's why I say I just love hearing myself talk. It's like, when I hear it back as I'm speaking it out, it's actually helping me to conceptualize and to formulate things better. Because, like if I'm sitting with my journal and my pen, it's like I'm kind of thinking about things, but it's a very mental process. But then when I start talking about it and I start purposely using my body, and it has the intention of like communicating something with somebody else through this medium, then things start to formulate better, things start to come out better. But again, like, I need that space to just be very mental and kind of like take it's like literally the process of manifestation, where you're going from the air element, or really the ether, which is just like this potential. The ether is just pure potential. And then the air element is like pure possibility. It's where it's like kind of one step down from that just pure potential, where it's like, okay, here's these kind of possibilities that are beginning to formulate. They're kind of just swirling around, all these different things. And then you step that down into the fire element. And I've learned this through, just studying Kabbalah. I can't think of Ivan Antics. I could be wrong. There's an author. I've read a couple books by him, but he kind of he references the Kabbalah in these kind of teachings, but it intuitively makes a lot of sense to me. So that's why I'm sharing it. So the fire element is like taking that idea, that possibility, and now it's like an intention. Now it's like you're kind of collapsing all of the different things into like, here's this one possibility here. Here's a potential here that I can envision. I can put my intention, give my attention to, connect with. And then the next level is like, now you're getting some emotional charge. This is like your purpose. This is like, why do I want this thing to be a realization so that I can have this physical, just this felt experience with it? Because again, the beauty of our minds is like there's infinite potential and we can like think about anything. But coming and being able to step that down into the physical, that's how we can really have this interaction. Because when it's in the physical, there's this like, it's almost like we have to take all the thingness, like everythingness, like pure potential, which we know it's there. We know it's all there in potential, but then we're able to step that down. And basically, in the same way that we can't know ourselves without the relationship with another, in the same way that like the complementary opposites that I referred to in the beginning, things need to come into the physical to create the ultimate illusion of separation. And through the illusion of separation, now we can have a subject-object relationship. And now we can have an experience because there's a relationship. Because if you're already everything, paradoxically, you can't experience anything because it's already all you. And so the only way to have an experience, and this is like, God shit. It's like the only way for God to have an experience is to create the illusion of separation. It's like, if you think if you were as big as the universe, like how do you look at anything? If you're as big as everything, how do you look at anything? How do you see anything? How do you touch anything? Because it's all you. So it's like you ultimately have to, it's like if you were to take your right foot and just like stick it in a wall or something where you can't see it. And you give, you put like, this I guess is a really good example. You give yourself anesthetic, that's what they call it, to basically make your foot numb. So you make your foot numb, you can't feel it and you can't see it. And then like after a while, you kind of forget that it's even there. It's like, it's not even part of you anymore. It's something that you have dissociated with your right foot. And, as I'm speaking this is something that we actually tend to do a lot of times with like parts of ourselves we don't like. But that's another discussion. But like so basically now, after a while, you've kind of completely forgotten about your foot. You forgot that it was even ever a part of you. And then like you start to see like your toe, your big toe starts to just come into view. And you're like, oh, hey, what's that? Now it's something separate from you. So it's like now you're having this new relationship with it. And then you kind of come to ultimately experience the entirety of your foot. But first you experience it as something that's separate from you, like a friend or a lover. It's like, there's a separate thing. But the more and more you come to know and the more and more you come to experience your foot, now after a while, it starts to become more and more a part of you. It starts to just envelop itself in you. You start to see all these similarities and these things that, you see yourself in it. It's like a mirror. And after a while, you kind of forget that it's even a mirror anymore. And because you're kind of coming to remember now. Remember, like it was there the whole time. It was like that the whole time. But you just forgot about it. And you forgot that you even chose to forget about it. It's just complete, just a veil pulled over you. But then after a while, it's like, and because of that, because when it's all part of you and it's not separated, you have no way to know it because it's just you. But once it's a separate thing, then you can come to know it again. And then you remember it as yourself with the knowingness of the experience of it. And that's really like this whole fucking experience. Like God is playing that same game so that it can come to know what God is. And if you want to like anthropomorphize, because I don't even think it's, it's like people stray away from calling God he or she. But in my personal experience, like when you get to a certain place where the words that you use, they have certain meanings because they're sound vibrations. So they're vibrations. And so they carry a certain frequency with them, but at the same time, we get to choose what that frequency means. We get to choose how we interpret that. If I say he in reference to God, and then there's automatically an interpretation of this kind of misunderstanding of what God is. Because again, like, I'll be honest, I still I have concepts and I have experience from the concepts that I've applied. And I kind of take what works and take what doesn't work. And I believe Laird Hamilton said this. He said, the truth is what works. So I see what works. And then for me, that is the truth, at least the truth for me in that time, in that place. But ultimately, that is the game that we are playing. And that's the difference between how, like, the human experience and, AI, and why I think, we use these things as tools, but it's knowing how all the pieces fit together, because they are all one in the end. The mind likes to, your logical mind likes to separate things, because that's how we can see things. That's how we can look at things. That's how we can analyze and interpret. But ultimately, you can't forget that it's all part of the same fundamental stuff. And so I think as we have now decided, because the last lesson 1 was all about deciding. Because for me, that's the ground floor of anything. Like, it's, talking about this, the ether, and then the steps down into manifestation. It's like, firstly, you just have to decide to make a decision. You've got to take, your current experience, and you've got to say that, okay, there's things here that I want to change. There's things that I want to be different here. There's things that just don't feel right to me. And I have to firstly recognize that there can be a difference. And I think, this even would go before making a decision, is recognizing that the current thing I'm experiencing is just one experience. And I can choose to have a different experience if I want to. And like, I know that there's a possibility for a different experience. And I have to believe that I am worthy of experiencing that experience. And the only way that I can feel worthy of that is ultimately I have to recognize that I am deserving of anything and everything there, because which is a product of you learning that there's no bad parts of you. Because when you see that there are parts of you, of yourself, of who you identify with, that are better or worse than other parts of you, then that belief about yourself, you end up projecting out into the world, and then it gets mirrored back to you. So then it's like you see different parts of yourself. Now you're also seeing that there's better or worse experiences, there's better or worse things out in the world. And that's where, our concept of really good and evil comes in to an extent. Because, what I'm talking about at a individual level also happens at like a big level, like a culture, all believing in, people all believing in the same kinds of shit. And because they all believe in the same kinds of shit, they all create similar experiences at a collective level. So it's like these things happen at different levels. But, for your own person, I think as a starting place, if you're coming from a place of just this idea, this illusion of complete separation and ultimately complete victimization, and then you identify with that, with those stories, with all those beliefs about who you think you are as this separate being having this separate experience. And if you are completely victimized, then you don't see that there's another option. But I think what tends to happen, at least this is my own personal experience, like you get into enough pain in your life to finally, and you kind of exhaust like all the different excuses, all the justifications, all the blaming. You exhaust so much of that finally you kind of just have to give up, because it's like nothing that you try to do to control things outside of you without looking at yourself first ever works. And so you get to a place where it's like, just fuck it. Like, I don't care anymore. And then I think at that critical point is when you maybe start to ask the question, what do I have to do with this? Like, how is the way that I'm showing up? How are the thoughts that I'm holding? How are the beliefs that I'm having? And this is where meditation is such a powerful tool, because in order to start having those thoughts, you have to be able to objectively see your thoughts. Because if you just continue to identify with everything that you're thinking, all the things that are happening, just your story, if you completely identify with your story, you're never, like a character in a story doesn't necessarily know that it's in a story. It's just playing out the story. Or like when you're in a dream, it's like you're kind of just watching the story unfold. But if you have like a lucid dream, now you're seeing that, now you can start to see that it is a dream. You can start to see that it is just a story that I'm telling myself. And there's a possibility for something different. Because, even at a logical point, it's like everything that we once thought was possible or was impossible, a lot of that is now possible, like driving a car, like flying a plane, like going into space, like artificial intelligence. Like there's so many things that were once thought to be just imaginary, but then now we are experiencing them. They became manifest. Now it's real. And so you really can't put a limit on what potential a person has, what possibilities are there to be explored. And so knowing that, like there's always a potential. There's always, at the very least, there's always a fucking potential. And that's like literally, that's all you need. You just need the potential. Because once you can envision it, once you can see it in your mind's eye, because you give yourself that permission to create something different, like creating a song or creating a piece of art. You're literally taking something that is imagined, or at a deeper level, and this is like ultimately as we come full circle into this whole process, at a deeper level, you're just emptying yourself of all the ideas, all the beliefs that you're holding on to, and just allowing spirit to move through you, allowing yourself to be acted through. Because it's like going back to the story, it's like you come full circle. At first, you're unconscious that you're even in the story. And then you get to a place where you realize like, I'm part of the story. I can choose my own adventure here. And then you realize that nothing is going to be as intelligent. Like I'm just one piece of the story, but because I'm in the story, it's very hard for me to see all the different pieces at play. And so therefore, just the idea of me trying to change all of these things, like I could think that I'm creating a better version of the story for myself, but then I end up finding myself in all these kind of, pains and like detours and things that are unfulfilling. Because like I'm doing what I think I should be doing. I'm trying to create this version of how I think things should be, but I'm not seeing the bigger picture. I'm not seeing how what I'm doing is connected to everything else and how everything else is connected to me. And so then you kind of come full circle and you get to a point where you just surrender to the story again. You realize that the story maker is way more intelligent of the overall big picture, because it's the one that's actually creating the story. That if I just surrender to that it's going to lead me exactly where I'm supposed to be for this story to play out in the way that it's meant to play out. So therefore, the best thing that I could possibly do is just not try to change anything. Is just to be myself. Is just to play my character and allow the story to be played through me. And paradoxically, at that moment, you dissolve and you become one with the story creator. And the whole fucking thing happens again. And it's just a cycle. It's beautiful. Shit, like this is shit that damn near makes me cry, man. And I'm all for crying, bro. But I just let it happen. Like I don't force myself to just try to cry because, you're supposed to cry. If it happens, it happens. Or not try to cry because you think you're not supposed to cry, which is the common one. So, you know what? I think that's the direction we're at today. You see how we talk this shit out? You see how this works? So lesson 2 is really all about recognizing that you have infinite potential and recognizing that you can change the story. And then once you have that recognition, that's not a fucking word. Once you have that recognition, then you can start to learn how to make that happen. But if I give you all the tools, if I teach you all the hows right now, but you don't have the what and the why, then you could just have it's like a kid with power tools. They don't know how to use them. It's like you've got these fucking magical tools at your disposal, but you don't know how to use them. And you have no reference, so you're not really going to be able to do anything. You might actually hurt yourself. So we have to get very clear on what it is you want and why you want it and give yourself permission to actually realize that potential within yourself. And then we can really start to play this game. But you got to know what you're getting into. You got to know what you're playing. All right. So yeah, I like that. Hopefully you found some value out of this. And even honestly, just being able to go through this process with me, just so you can kind of see how I think about things. I think even that in itself can be very valuable. Not to say that the way I think about things is the only way that you're supposed to think about things, but just to have that witness of somebody else kind of going through a process so that it can give you some perspective to look at your own process, because we all kind of do things in different ways. So that ultimately you can kind of find your own really unique way of going through these things. So I hope this was helpful. Even if it wasn't, fuck them. I found it helpful. That's for damn sure. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. And I look forward to sharing more again with you soon. Peace, y'all. Here's one for the dogs. Thanks. Peace.